All right, me. It is mid-September. It's actually the day after I finished reading this book. I'm halfway through the next book in the series, but I realized when I filmed this one, I had filmed it outside, and it's basically unintelligible, so I have to re-record it. But yesterday, I finished reading Hank Green's An Absolutely Remarkable Thing. What was the publication date on this? 2018, I think? 2020? Somewhere around there, I think. 2018, I was right. Really fun book, really enjoyable book. I think I've made it, pretty aware at this point that I do really like science fiction in a lot of ways. I think it lends itself to a lot of discussions and important things, both about our society, but also where, the world is heading, and being able to interpret or view things in unique ways, right? It's not like there's a lot of necessarily allegory in this, right? It's fairly straightforward piece, which is good, right? You don't always need these like super what does it all mean type deals, right? Sometimes you can get hit over the head a little bit with it, and that's fine, right? Now that I'm halfway through reading the next book, it does feel a lot just like kind of like a setup for this longer book, which I think is also fine, right? But definitely feels like kind of like a prelude, or like a prologue to this much larger story, right? But yeah. Like I said, I think it's fun, it's enjoyable. It's not like it's forcing anything down, or it's not like it's being really destructive in the way that it kind of puts things together, right? I think it kind of falls into some of the same traps that I think I've talked about previously, right? Of where like every character has to be, specifically female characters have to be attractive in some way, right? And I think that that's just a thing that, whether it be for male authors or whether it just be that through a societal perspective of what sells within literature, right? Yeah. I think it's not like the ideas that are being pushed forward are really anything new, especially if you are someone who has watched Hank Green stuff before. But in terms of the way that humanity works and the way that we should be moving forward, right? The whole the conceptual idea that we need to be willing to work with each other, whether or not we can necessarily understand each other in the best way, is super important, right? We need to be constantly able to work with each other in things, right? And be willing to use diverse skill sets to solve things, right? And solve things not just because we think we should, or because it makes us money, right? But because it helps further us, or helps us achieve a goal that is more than just making money, right? Which is, I think, what a huge focus of it is on. You get some commentary about the relationship between politics, left-wing, right-wing, conservative, liberal, but then you also get really kind of a big thing about this whole issue of extremes on both ends, and only viewing parties by their extremists, and only viewing politics by their extremists. But then you also get this whole argument, which is that, like, these people are figureheads for their movement, and they get away with saying, oh, well, I'm just saying this, and people that are listening to me then take it a step further, right? And then not having responsibility for the actions of people that they're encouraging to do things, right? Which is, it's a huge topic, right? And it's a topic that we're still dealing with right now, of where, how far does this rhetoric go, right? How far can we push people and then say that, oh, we didn't do it, right? It's kind of like, to compare to something I think, a little bit strange, but it's very Saul-like, of where like, oh, well, I didn't kill these people. I just put them in situations that were solvable, and then they killed themselves. Or they chose to do it, right? Or like, it's the police officer's fault because they didn't stop things in time, right? It feels, it's very much like that, right? Of where, as a figurehead, you, whether or not you want to, become unfortunately responsible for a lot of the things that people say and do underneath you. So yeah. Anything else to really talk about with this piece? The main character, April May. I think it's always very interesting when you intentionally make your main character someone who's not designed to be likable. It's this whole thing of where she is designed to be this, where like the reality of it is that she's a bad girlfriend and kind of a terrible human being, but she is willing to position herself as the figurehead for the good of humanity in some way, willing to work with this foreign object in Carl's, which is both exemplary, but is also this kind of terrifying thing, right? Of where like, because often when it comes down to, whether it be in fiction or within our lives or things like that. Ooh, phone, what are you doing, pal? With fiction or with reality and a lot of things, right? It is up to the youth to figure things out and fix things. And often they will do things wrong, and we will do things wrong. But it is this wholehearted belief that we are making the best decision at that time for the best reason, which is super, super important. More about, April is that like, she straddles this line between where like physically, like she's making a lot of bad personal decisions, which, makes sense. But then it also becomes this likable moment in which, because this is being written after the fact, it's not, I'm trying to think like, I can't even really think of one where your protagonists are unlikable in some way. Usually it's written in the moment, and therefore becomes really hard, right? Part of the enjoyment is that they are just super unlikable, and you have to kind of force yourself through it. But for this, right, because it's being written after the fact, you have this character that is unlikable, but is also super, super likable, because they are admitting their own faults and being like, oh, hey, you're gonna hate me in a couple chapters and things. Which is a really nice balance for that character. Yeah. Anything else to talk about with this book? No, I don't think so, because I want to get it conflicted and then start talking about the next book, which I'm already halfway through, which is making this kind of difficult to talk about. But yeah, that's my thoughts on an extremely remarkable thing, an absolutely remarkable thing. Sorry, by Hank Green. Yeah.